Thanks for joining me today. I just want to take a minute and talk a little bit about what's going on with the PPP program, because things may not be as you think they are with this PPP program. And I recommend, if you get the funding, and some people have gotten the funding already, we've seen over the last week, people throughout the country are getting their PPP loans funded, and that's a great thing. But before you put into place your plan of action, I think you ought to stop and think for a minute a little bit longer term. Because by definition, this PPP program is short term. It's focused on 8 weeks. And that is perfectly a fine thing, but there may be some other answers that would be right for you. Everybody wants to get it forgiven, right? And that would be fantastic. But I don't think that's the solution for everybody, to have it all forgiven. A 1% loan is not the worst thing that you can repay anytime you want. It's not necessarily the first thing. And I think what I'd recommend you think about is, okay, if this thing all ends within the next 8 weeks and we're all back to normal, that'll be great. Then the PPP program will be perfect, and you could go ahead and spend it all on payroll, or 75% of it on payroll, and that would probably end up with a good outcome for you. However, what if that doesn't happen? And as leaders, I think one of the things we need to think about is alternatives. We're responsible for keeping our businesses going regardless of what happens. And we can't depend on the government to just come out with another PPP in 8 weeks if things don't go perfectly well, and we hope and pray that they do. But I'd encourage you to think a little bit beyond PPP. A lot of people are thinking they're going to just keep people on payroll or bring people back where there's not a need during this 8-week period, and maybe that makes sense and maybe it doesn't. But I want everybody to think through maybe an alternative strategy here. And that would be this. Think about bringing back your workers on just an as-needed basis. If the work is there, bring them in. But I'd encourage you not to necessarily just put everybody back on payroll, or I've heard some people are going to pay people to stay at home. I don't know that that's the best strategy. It might be right for you based on your values, but I think you ought to really think that through because, as I said, 1% at the end, if you have money left over, let's say you don't bring all your employees back, you bring some employees back, and at the end of the 8 weeks, you also can pay some of the money towards rent and some other costs. At the end, you have money left over. At the end of the 8 weeks, if you have money left over, that becomes a 1% loan. But I'm encouraging you to think about that. To think about maybe keeping some of your powder dry. Because what happens after 8 weeks? And we don't know a whole lot right now, but maybe at the end of 6 or 7 weeks, we'll have a better perspective as to what's going to happen. We only would need a few days of bad news. We've had some really good news here the last week or so, but we only need a few days of bad news to really flip everything around and send everything kind of backwards as far as all the progress that we've made. Now, one thing else you need to think about as well is unemployment. Unemployment is just unbelievably high. I personally think that the federal government is providing too much in the way of unemployment, because right now, and I'm not saying people shouldn't, I don't want to see people get by, but what we have happening right now is that jobs are competing against unemployment, and that's a real bad situation. So we've had people offer people jobs back, and they'd rather stay on unemployment. And that's not the best incentives for our company culture, not the best incentives for just who we are as Americans. But it is what it is. In your situation, people who you decide not to bring back or you're going to put on unemployment, they've got a very generous unemployment package out there. And some people will want to stay on that in the short term. And maybe you don't use all the money on payroll, right? I would just encourage you to be wise with that. Think that through before you jump in and just say, okay, let's just bring everybody back on payroll right now. Because my question is this: what happens after the 8 weeks, right? If everything goes great as we would love it to be, hey, maybe we're all back to normal in 8 weeks. But what if it's not? And the person that's responsible for that is probably you. How does your business go on beyond the 8 weeks if things aren't perfect? If we have other outbreaks, or if we have other hot spots, or something in the economy doesn't go well? Maybe having a little bit of money as a 1% loan would be helpful. Well, listen, if we can help you talk through any of these issues, because they're big theoretical issues, they're moral issues, things to talk about, I'm happy to help you. Any of our people on our team here are happy to help you with that. Let you know we appreciate you, and reach out to us if we can help you in any way. Have a great day.